Hello. Today is July 30th, 2024. I'm Mike Vinsel, and today we're going to continue reading my book, Travels with Nobody. Stephen Stroh recalls America in the early 1980s. Okay, and so today I'm going to do chapter 13, which starts on page 199. And so here we go. Chapter 13, just a second, I have some coffee here. Okay, chapter 13, The Christmas Party. A couple days before Christmas, the phone rang. Matthew answered. Hello? This is he? Yeah? Uh-huh. Just a second. He turned to Philip, cupping his hand over the receiver. It's Alan Routhier, the guy from Albuquerque. Philip silently waved to signal he didn't want to talk to the guy, so Matthew finished the call. After a few sentences back and forth, he said goodbye and hung up. Steve, did you tell that guy he could stay here for the Dead shows? As I remember it, I had not told him he could, but in an effort to be polite, I might have been non-committal, but I had to answer Matthew. I didn't say that. He asked, and I said he should call you. I said, I think truthfully. Well, he said you told him it would be okay, Matthew said. I might have said that I didn't see why not, or something like that, I said. What's this or shit? Don't you know what you told the guy? Matthew said. The fact was that I didn't remember the exact words I used. Apparently I had not been clear enough, because from what Matthew was saying, it sounded like the guy had expected a welcome. Did other people remember their exact words in those situations? Was this a symptom of a serious cognitive problem in me? I hope not. Today, Steve, here's the thing. Don't ever invite people to stay at other people's houses. You should never do that, okay? Matthew said. I acknowledged his words and thought to myself, checkmate, another lesson learned. Yes, checkmate, I had walked into it, but if the guy was so bad, why did Philip give me his phone number in the first place? I wondered silently to myself. I had another contact in the San Francisco Bay Area, Lori Sandhurst. She had been at Pat Wrigley and Kevin Paulson's wedding. She knew them from LRY, Liberal Religious Youth. Pat and Kevin were both LRY members. They had met Lori at a gathering on Star Island in the Isles of Shoals off the coast of New Hampshire. I didn't know much about LRY except what they had told me. The group had meetings in the Unitarian Church in New Dartford. Every year or so they had these big conferences in different places around the country. I had never had any attraction to religion or spirituality. My parents had made it clear that when we were older and lived on our own, we were all free to do whatever we liked concerning religion. But as long as you live under our roof, as my father had put it, you're Catholic. End of discussion. There would be no exploration of other religions under that roof. So I had never been to an LRY meeting, but they sounded like a lot of fun from what Pat and Kevin had told me. People would sing songs around a campfire and do all this hippie spiritual stuff. It occurs to me now, sitting by the pond in Japan, thinking back to those days, that Tracy Bass, the girl I had given the ride on the tractor that day in the previous September, the first girl I ever kissed, she too was in LRY. She had been to the Star Island conference. She knew Pat Wrigley. She probably knew Lori Sandhurst too. Anyway, at the wedding, Lori had been friendly to me, and Pat had given me her phone number, so I called her up. She lived in Tiburon, just across the bay from San Francisco. She said, of course she remembered me. She told me that the next day they were going to have a Christmas party at their house, and she'd love it if I could go. So I went. She told me to take the ferry to Larkspur, and to call before I left, and she would pick me up at the ferry terminal. The next day, I took the bus downtown to the ferry building, checked the timetable, called Lori from a payphone, and was on my way. It was raining. I have always liked boats, and riding on the ferry was fun, even though I had to stay inside. As the ferry slowed down on its approach to the dock, I looked out to the right and saw San Quentin Prison. There was a big fence with razor wire on top, forming the outermost barrier. Behind that was a series of yellow brick buildings and towers. It was a scary-looking place. I believe that at that time, Charles Manson was inside those walls. If not at that moment, then sometime along the way, he had done time there. Johnny Cash once played there. Rich Sanderson had the album, San Quentin Prison, in the rain, silent, bleak. I remember thinking that at the time. The ferry docked at Larkspur Landing. Lori was waiting when I arrived. We ran under her umbrella to her car, got in, and she drove up into the hills to her mother's house. It was a small but fancy house tucked into a grove of redwood trees. If not for the rain, the view would have been spectacular, overlooking the bay. I'm sure we could have seen the Golden Gate Bridge had the weather been clear. We went inside. There were about 20 people at the party. Lori introduced me to her mother, and then the other guests. They had a Christmas tree, a real tree, not artificial. The smell reminded me of all my past Christmases. My parents had always insisted on having a real tree. This would be my first Christmas away from home, since my mother had died. Lori's mother was an artist. Her paintings lined the walls, as did paintings by some of the other guests. One man was a stage actor. One woman introduced herself to me by asking me what kind of art I did. She assumed I was an artist. I had some modest talent for drawing pictures, but I did not consider myself an artist. I told her I had just driven across the country from New Hampshire, and I tied flies for fishing. I also whittled lures out of wood, mainly small branches of white pine. They had a hollow pith core that I could run the wire through without having to drill it. I told her. I painted them with enamel paint. I hadn't brought any of my lures or flies with me, but it was true. I did make those things. She nodded and introduced me to a group of other people, telling them that I had just driven all the way from New Hampshire. There was a table with lots of food. It was a potluck. I hadn't brought anything, but Lori had said I didn't need to. There were wrapped presents under the tree. I had not known how it would be, but it turned out that there was one for each guest, even me. We ate and drank and chatted. When it got dark, it was time for people to do performances. One guy played the guitar. He played a couple songs. Then one woman in her 20s recited a poem she had written. The poem went on for 4 or 5 minutes. Very sad, dark, recounting the heroin addiction and ultimate suicide of her sister, who had recently been found dead in a Tenderloin hotel. It was a true story. She had used that word, tenderloin, in the poem. At the time, I had figured it was an adjective for the hotel. It seemed to me that perhaps it might have been akin to certain bars being called meat markets. I didn't say anything about that at the party, except for some words of consolation about her sister. Later, Matthew told me about the Tenderloin. He told me that it was what the red light district of San Francisco was called. Her reading got enthusiastic applause at the party. I applauded too. I supposed, at the time, that in considering someone else's situation, I would have to understand that I would be facing every single element of that person's life history and personality, not my own. If I had been in the same situation as the sister who was found in the Tenderloin Hotel, in the end, the end would have been the same, because that is what she did. That is what the train, that was the train of thought the poem inspired in me. Soon it came time for everybody to find their presents under the tree. Each one had a tag with a name. Everybody got theirs. All the guests sat in a circle on the floor. One by one, we unwrapped the gifts, showing them to the group. Most of them were humorous prank gifts, like candies shaped like women's breasts. When my turn came, I unwrapped the package and opened the box to find a pair of edible women's panties. They looked like they were made of red and green clear cellophane, but it was edible. Everybody laughed. I laughed too, but nervously, because I wasn't sure if I might be expected to use them on Lori. She was a nice person, but I wasn't ready for that. It was fine. Nothing came of it. But given the avant-garde spirit of the party, such an expectation would not have surprised me. After all, rumors of the goings-on in the spiritual underground San Francisco scene had been full of all kinds of stories. My imagination swirled with them. But alas, for that time, I was off the hook. After that, the party was winding down. Lori's mother rounded up the guests who needed to catch the last ferry to San Francisco. I loaded into the station wagon with the other people. That night, I got back to Matthew's place and told him and Philip about the party. I showed them the edible panties. Matthew laughed. "Ah, Stevie Mon, you're getting a real California experience." That night, I thought about what it must be like to grow up with parents like Lori's. I never met nor heard mention of her father. I had not asked. Having such a party with my parents would have been unthinkable. The poetry reading about the girl who committed suicide, the gift of edible panties, none of that could have ever happened with my parents. Did I wish my parents had been more like Lori's mother? No. Was I glad to have gone to the party? Yes. Would I have rather spent Christmas, it was a couple days before Christmas, at home with my parents as I had in the past? No. Anyway, Mom was gone now. It wouldn't be the same. But why would I have been hesitant at the idea of having sex with Lori? Surely that's what the gift was, a not-so-subtle invitation. Was it? I don't know. She was attractive. Before that, the closest I had ever been to having sex with anyone was with Tracy Bass. I had known Tracy for several years, though, when we finally kissed, and that's as far as it went. I knew that lots of guys would have jumped at the opportunity, or at least would have made the best of however much of an invitation that gift might have actually been. But I guess not me. I wondered if the way it had been with Tracy, that over years of quietly hoping for a chance, then having a miracle happen, the miracle that she had been walking on that beautiful section of road in New Hampshire when I happened by on the tractor, it seemed that fate had delivered her to me. And those moments, eating dinner together with her in the bunkhouse with the Jamaicans, that first walk into the darkness that same night when we first kissed. Would it ever be like that again? Or would it happen quickly, one night, meeting somebody one night and having it go that way? That's what I thought about that night, some days before Christmas, when I was 20 years old. Somewhere in there, Christmas came and went. I don't have any particular memory of Christmas Day, except that we called our father in New Hampshire. He would be going to have Christmas dinner at Martha Sanford's house with her and her two boys. Martha would later become our stepmother. Philip and I had both met her. Matthew had not. Okay, that's the end of chapter 13. So see you next time. Okay.